Hello, welcome back to 78 Reflections. My name is Patty Elaine, and I'm so glad you're here. This is my second video in my series about the seasonal shift, and that's really focusing in on the Wheel of the Year and the Witches' Sabbats. And I talked about this a little bit in my first video about the Witches' Rest as the 8 seasons that kind of wrap around the Sabbats. And now as we're sort of shifting into Imbolc, which is where I live, second winter, the light is slowly returning and the days are lengthening, but we're still in this winter season. Yet sometimes it can be a bit jarring for me to shift. And some of the work that I've been doing with the Wildwood Tarot has really helped me understand that a little bit more. And so I thought we could talk about that today. So I've been working with the Wildwood Tarot since winter solstice. And the cards that I'm going to be referring to are from the guidebook. If you have this from page 26, if you want to pause this or take a screenshot, this is what I'm going to be referring to. More specifically, you see here, this is like the darker half of the year, the moon on water. And this midwinter solstice, we have the moon on water with the hooded man and the great bear. And then we're moving towards still the moon on water, but the ancestor and the pole star. So that's what we're going to talk about to start with here. So this card here is the card for the darker half of the year, and it's the moon on water, card 18 in the major arcana. And it refers to this time of inner transformation, of turning inward, listening, allowing things to dissolve and reshape below the surface. It's a natural response to the darkness that we experience in this half of the year, and that natural desire to go inward, to become quieter and more reflective. And that journey during that midwinter, the winter solstice, is the hooded man, that hermit energy. After a long journey through the wildwood, we have this need to withdraw, to rest, to absorb and integrate what we've lived and learned. And this is a necessary pause. Oh, I have the wrong card here. That is supposed to be the great bear. The great bear represents hibernation, healing, renewal. The guidebook reminds us that the only thing guaranteed in life is change, but how we survive that change and who we are after is really up to us. And this is the rebirth that happens quietly, inwardly, and it's full of potential, but it's not yet visible. So this is the terrain we're emerging from: stillness, rest, healing, and quiet becoming. And then we go through this period that I like to call the Witches' Rest, which is this period starting around the new year, but for sure after Yule, and going in towards the first week of the new year, maybe longer, depending on your season of life. But that Witches' Rest period is really a time of liminal space, of being in the in-between. And we're moving towards Imbolc, and that's when we meet the ancestor. So you can see the ancestor card here, and she stands at the nexus between the passing winter and the coming spring. She stands at the fork in the path, at the entryway that leads us into the forest, and she carries a wand of wisdom and this drum that calls us to gather and witness the sunrise. And I thought it was really interesting for me thinking of this ancestor who, in the guidebook, it states she is the guardian of this sacred heart of the land. Her drum beats to the heartbeat of the earth. And so for me, I was I was laughing to myself, thinking about, no wonder it's jarring. Here we're having a nice hibernation and quiet rest. And then this ancestor comes beating on this drum, and it's time to rejoin the land of the living, which, you know, can feel like a bit much. So we see here the silver birch trees on either side of the path forming the gateway. And it's a reminder that once we step forward, we are beginning something new. And we're committing to this path that we're going to carry forward on for the rest of the wheel of the year. And the other card that comes into play here is the pole star. The pole star doesn't give us certainty, but what it does give us is direction. It reminds us that even when the path feels dark or unclear, there are these ancient guiding principles that can orient us. And if we can orientate ourselves to our own true north, that's how we follow the pole star forward on this journey. And it's mostly about choosing our direction at this point, not necessarily knowing what the rest of the path holds, because we're still in this moon in the water, dark season of the year. So for me, in starting to think and process Imbolc, I started with this Wildwood Tarot and thinking about these cards and how they're showing up for me in my day-to-day. One of the other tools that I use when I'm doing the seasonal shift is spending time with the Seasons of the Witch cards. So I now have all 8 of these. And what I can find helpful when I'm starting to lean into the seasonal shift is to just flip through these cards and see which of the cards are resonating with me. I'll also do a card pull. That is my evening practice. So arts and crafts is something that I really enjoy. And thinking about the season that we're going into and maybe some seasonal crafts that I might want to do. Thinking of some of the seasonal food. Bridget. I was learning about Bridget, I remember last year around this time, and I was thinking this year I would like to make a corn husk Bridget doll. And even just thinking about seasonal foods, making casseroles. Who doesn't love cinnamon rolls? And while we know that spring is coming, I don't know about you, but for me it still feels far away because we are still in these dark days of winter. One of the things that I've been thinking about is spending more time in the period of dawn and making sure that I'm noticing dawn, going outside. So for me, to help me shift into the energy of the next season, just looking at these cards and thinking about these cards, flipping through them can be a very simple thing that I will start to do. Working with my grimoire, thinking about the groundhog and the owl. Maybe burning some incense. There's the North Star. Remember the pole star from our tarot cards. Tending our space. This tends to be a season when I feel like, not aggressively, but slowly starting to tend my space. Maybe do some light decluttering. So for me, flipping through these cards, I'll probably start pulling a card a night. Usually for me, I start to move into the season 2 to 3 weeks before the actual dates. We know Imbolc is February 1st. And usually for me, 2 to 3 weeks before then, I'll naturally start to be curious about exploring that season and maybe start to pull the Season of the Witch cards nightly from that deck. The other thing I have grown to love is this book from The Wheel of the Year by Fiona Cook and Jessica Roux. I think that Lisa Pepez introduced me to this book, and I know it's supposed to be a children's book, but I don't care because I love it. And just even flipping through this book or reading excerpts from this book is really great to get into the seasonal energy. So it talks about, there's some things that you can read. There we go. There's the Bridget dolly that I want to make. I thought this was really interesting, is starting to think about who's coming out of hibernation and looking for animal tracks. That's really relevant where I live. Starting to think about what you want to plant in the garden. Maybe you're going to start doing some things inside or in your greenhouse. Making a very basic Imbolc altar. Candle magic. Making golden pancakes. So what I find is between the cards and also through flipping through this book, I start to feel connected with the energy of the season coming already. And I find it inspirational. I might start to make a list of some things I would like to do that I would enjoy doing. Sometimes I feel like doing tarot card spreads. I might do a modified Celtic cross or something like that. I haven't been feeling like doing the bigger spreads, but what I have been doing is I have been working with animal energy. And the cards that I pulled for Imbolc were these two. They actually came out in this order: Buffalo Spirit and Brown Bear Spirit. And it was interesting because I was having some chaotic energy when I was pulling these cards, and the cards were flying all over the place and multiple cards were coming out. And so I did some grounding and some centering with some breath work. And then in a calmer moment, these two cards came out together. And I glanced at them and I thought, you know what? I think these are perfect cards for the season that we're in. When I think about the buffalo and the bear, some of the things that they have in common is they're both very large animals. They also are animals that live in seasonal places, and they have to adapt to the seasons. They also are very, very strong animals, and have very protective nature. And so I started to think through these animals. And what I often like to do is come up with a word that represents the energy. And you may have seen my community post where I came up with my word from the whale spirit and the deer spirit. And so similarly, spending time thinking about these animals, I was trying to think about what word really resonated with me. And I ended up coming up with acclimate. And I thought that was perfect because, as I've been feeling some challenges with the current season and the adjustments, I thought, this is very similar to how people who need to acclimate to higher elevations, some of the advice that you would give them, we can use for ourselves in acclimating to Imbolc. When we have this ancestor beating their drum and trying to get us to get up and move forward towards the pole star. When really, we might feel more like we're still in our hermit mode and hibernating. And these were the 5 things I wrote down. Number 1, go slow. Number 2, climb high. So what I mean by that is fully engage in my life, but sleep low. Create calm. Allow myself maybe more time to sleep than I would need in the summertime. Drink lots of water. Let your body do its work. And for me, that means, maybe this isn't the season for really intense workouts. Maybe it's the time for stretching, long walks. And then number 5 is take a breath. If it feels hard, we're never going to bail. We're going to keep going. Because remember, once we're on this path, we're committed through the wheel of the year. But it's okay to pause and recalibrate as needed. So this has been really helpful for me and encouraging and making me feel like I might be ready to transition into Imbolc. And I'm going to start pulling my cards every night. So if you're like me and you're feeling a bit of resistance to the change right now, know that you're not alone. I think this is part of the natural cycle. And with patience, kindness, and perseverance, we find our way through. So I thank you for joining me today. I hope you found this video interesting. And I would love to hear from you your thoughts on the seasonal shift and what your experience is going to Imbolc. Maybe you have some tips or tricks that you can share with me. I would love to hear from you. But please like this video if you do. Subscribe if you're interested in hearing more from me. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. And until then, may our cards give us truth bombs when we need them and gentleness when we don't. See you soon.